you can't change the fact that technology is always evolving. That of course is something that's unavoidable. And generally within 18 months you'll see a new technology, a new architecture, a new way of doing something, and the chances are that with that there's going to be a publicised energy improvement, energy efficiency improvement with it. But as I say, you need to look at not just what buying that new technology is going to give you, but what you're leaving behind by the waste that you're creating. And I think it's good for people to remember that when they're thinking about sort of upgrading projects, and to engage with their company, whoever they bought their hardware with, in terms of, is there a different route to replacing? Is there a way of upgrading, or is there, or what's the right way of moving their equipment on, or getting it recycled or reprocessed.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Making It Happen by Sims. Today we have the pleasure of our second podcast with long-standing partner G2 Digital, and Chris is jumping on for us again. Last time we joined Kevin, our CCO, around 3 years ago, I believe. So how are you, Chris? How's things?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Drew, and thanks for catching up with us again about this. Yeah, it's things are good, actually. Yeah, things at G2 are a bit different from where we were last time. We've moved premises and more staff, new customers, all the great things, and obviously still doing lots of great business with Sims. Appreciating all the support, particularly as we were just discussing, some difficult, interesting times at the moment.
Yeah.
But, it's good. It's good. We're very, very, very pleased how the last few years have gone. But yeah, it's nice to have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think just for our viewers who don't know G2 and haven't seen the podcast, just a bit of an overview of what you guys do from a sort of basic level, and how things have maybe changed with the business, if at all, in the last 5 years. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so G2 Digital are a rack mounts computer manufacturer. We're quite niche in our industry, I think, because we particularly focus on the engineering side of what we do. So that is around the design, engineering, manufacture, delivery, customization, pretty much everything that goes with sort of getting rack-mounted systems out, particularly into the AV industries, where we found an awful lot of our customers, an awful lot of interest from our sort of repeat buys and things like this, is just being able to deliver rugged rack-mounted systems that stand the test of time. And that's really where longevity, I think, probably sits into what we're going to talk about.
No, great, that's awesome. And I think the bit that kind of spurred on this conversation is you guys have recently done an article which is called Shades of Green. It's from what I remember, around a complex kind of quest for sustainable rack-mounted PCs, and obviously Sims are featured in that as a sustainable partner of choice. And it's quite a thoughtful piece, and it's one we obviously resonate with here at Sims, and it raises some interesting challenges around sustainability and hardware. And as you said, we were discussing AI off camera and how that's happened and taken over things, and in the past sort of year, and quite I think globally, has sustainability maybe got lost as a message within all of this? I don't think it has, but locally it certainly hasn't, from how we've been working with our own customers and obviously the article that you put out. But I think what's kind of prompted you to write this, and was there a particular customer challenge or internal initiative, or just a moment that got you guys at G2 thinking about this a bit more deeply and sharing it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think for me, sustainability is a personal responsibility. I think we can talk about whether it's local or global or anything else, but I think fundamentally, people engage with this at a personal level, as we do around our homes, with what we buy, what we recycle, and all that kind of thing. And I think as it's taken into the business environment, and there's an awful lot of the direction is led by governments and global policy in terms of how we recycle things. But I think it's about taking some responsibility ourselves for actually what we can do without being told first what we should do. And so obviously, as managing director of G2, I've got that ability to be able to drive the direction of where I think we should be going with it. Recently we completed our ISO 14001 to go with our 9001. Because I think it's good to look at how we are as a business, particularly within our new premises that we're setting into, what our energy usage is, But then going forward from that, where does that lead us with our products? Because as you rightly say, AI is, all domineering at the moment. Everybody's talking about it. And of course, data centers and energy and all the things that have to go into it. But for us, in terms of the machines that we manufacture, this is about, being able to look at how we can impact and what we can change and what drives us to inform our customers, I think, in the right way. And a lot of that does come down to longevity, about, how long systems last, of course. I mentioned recycling, of course, we look at the ways in which the materials we use, but the reality is, the vast majority of the waste created from computing at the moment is the computing electrical items themselves. It's not the packaging, which can be recycled. It's what do we do about everything else?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think obviously you guys, I take it you manufacture in the UK and the metalwork, and is everything sort of done in the UK? I mean, because that's going to have effects on supply chains
That's
and
That's exactly it, right? It's we want to keep, onshoring, I think, is becoming more and more popular now. We saw lots of companies struggle during COVID with shipping prices. And one of the things I've always maintained is that I want to keep as much manufacturing as possible in the UK. So
yeah,
as you say, all of our sheet metal fabrication, cabling PCBs, as much as we manufacture and have control of, we will always purchase from within the UK. When we start to look outside of that supply chain, what we can't supply in the UK, we'll look into Europe, to pick up the rest. We just want to keep things as considerate as possible in terms of where components come from.
great. And I think you've made the point around longevity on the podcast in the few minutes that we've had, and obviously in the article as well. And I suppose that a machine designed to last 10 years can actually be more sustainable than one that's replaced every three, I guess. So can you just expand a bit more on how longevity fits into your overall philosophy around sustainability as a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we always go through technology leaps, and sometimes people get caught up in there's the next processor and the next piece of memory or whatever it is, the next thing that needs to be the next technology that needs to be used. And I think the reality is, we try and have that conversation with customers. We, spec for the future. We create systems that are going to last. As you say, we now deal with customers regularly who are asking for 5, 10 year plus devices. People are gone are the days when they want to be replacing machines every 2 years. Apart from the cost element, you've physically got to get rid of the waste. And it's all about, trying to create hardware that in the first instance is obviously reliable enough that the specification is suitable for the longevity of the application. But also in the future then is what happens when it does go wrong? Of course, hardware after 5 or 10 years, if it's not been serviced properly or it's been used quite extensively, it may well have a problem.
Yeah.
So we create devices that can be serviced, they can be repaired, they can be upgraded. We only a couple of weeks ago were talking to a customer who still has one of our devices in full operational use after 10 years, and it's great to hear about those projects that are still being used. And that's not a high spec machine. It's not doing a high load application. It's just something that doesn't need to be replaced. So why would you do it?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I suppose with that, and would you agree that customers are just starting to probably appreciate that longer life cycles can actually just be a much greener choice, even if it means, a slightly higher initial investment? And I'm not sure even if it does, but would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it particularly requires a higher investment. I mean, we work with lots of great manufacturers. Obviously, Sims deals with companies like Innodisk as well, manufacturers like Innodisk who do great industrial memory. These aren't really particularly expensive options. They're just considered options. Instead of going for the easiest thing that somebody can grab off the shelf, it just means dealing with more specialist manufacturers like us. We've got the links to the manufacturing companies, the more industrial suppliers who deal with making product that actually is designed for these longer life cycles instead of the stack it high kind of dynamics of some of the other, or aspirations of some of the other companies that sort of deal with that. But I think, as I say, this is all about the combination of being UK made, making the right, informing customers, making the right choices, understanding what people are actually trying to achieve rather than just making a sale. We want to engage with the customers and do the right thing to ensure that they get the right product that's going to work for them for the longest period of time. And the byproduct is that means they won't be adding more waste to landfill sooner than
Yeah.
they need to.
Yeah, no, it's great. It sounds almost rather than, speaking to someone, it's not a sales pitch, it's an education pitch around, and every customer is different, right? So, but like you say, on the flip side of that is just how fast technology is moving. And we had this discussion just now, new chipsets, form factors, standards,
Yeah.
energy efficient features, all these things, it's just how do you really balance designing for long life with keeping up with the innovation and expectations of what performance driven customers? Really, a lot of it does come down to performance, or is that just not the customers that you deal with? They get an education piece from you, it's just not all performance.
No, I think we deal with everything really. We deal with lots of customers who are looking for the latest rendering workstations. It's great to see that the manufacturers, as you picked up on there, manufacturers, particularly of the processors, are constantly evolving that technology. So there is, of course, an argument that eventually it becomes better to use a newer processor that's more efficient, doing a better job. But again, they are also in themselves working, designing an architecture that is upgradable without having to change the motherboard and without having to change everything else. If you buy some of the smaller form factor systems, the only thing you can change on is memory, an
Yeah,
SSD if you're lucky. They're
yeah,
so embedded that there's absolutely nothing that you can do with them to upgrade them. And so there's the future proofing just is non-existent.
mm,
Whereas with the systems we have, maybe they're slightly larger, in terms of our small form factor stuff, or right the way up to our high-end servers, 4U servers and things, that do the very heavy lifting. We can upgrade that hardware. We encourage those conversations where customers can come back and talk to us about why their system isn't doing what they want anymore and what can
yeah.
they upgrade. We talked about data centers as well. Of course, data centers isn't just about power, it's about heat as well. We've got plenty of systems where we design liquid cooling for these days as well. It's about transferring heat and energy in a different way and using it to the advantage, I think.
Yeah, I think cooling's definitely moved on, right? I think so I previously worked in the data center, and for me it was, everything was air cooling, and now liquid cooling is taking over, and I think there's even immersion cooling, which is going to sort of
Indeed.
coming in as well in the future. So the cooling is a very, very important aspect. And I suppose there are areas really where sustainability and performance can actually go hand in hand rather than the compute, right? I mean, like you said, some of the products that our manufacturers are producing right now they're just incredibly energy efficient, and that really sort of moves on drastically in the sort of past few years. So there is a world where they can both go hand, right? Compute, performance, and sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, you can't change the fact that technology is always evolving.
Yeah,
That of course is something that's unavoidable. And generally within 18 months you'll see a new technology, a new architecture, a new way of doing something, and the chances are that with that there's going to be a publicized energy improvement, energy efficiency improvement with it. But as I say, you need to look at not just what buying that new technology is going to give you, but what you're leaving behind by the waste that you're creating. And I think it's good for people to remember that when they're thinking about sort of upgrading projects, and to engage with their company, whoever they bought their hardware with, in terms of, is there a different route to replacing? Is there a way of upgrading, or is there, or what's the right way of, moving their equipment on or getting it recycled or reprocessed? The great thing about working with G2 is that because we just do all the design and manufacture and the components have come from us, we can obviously rebuild systems with new hardware, and we do that quite a lot because apart from anything else, it means that the brand that's being created, or the identity perhaps that the customer's using of their hardware, can just be continued, but just with a new lease of life inside.
yeah, no, great. And I think you also mentioned that I think if you were to ask 10 suppliers about their eco credentials, you probably get 10 different answers. So I think with this, which I think everyone in the channel can probably relate to, it would just be good to understand what's your view on how the industry could probably work better together, create a more consistent framework around green manufacturing and component sourcing, if at all, or is, even if it's 10 different answers, are the channel doing a job as it is already?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the sustainability is going to come from supply chain by
Yeah,
everyone pulling together and making the same, good choices together. It's not an individual company's choice, like an individual problem like ours. It's for everybody to do that. Sims understand that. That's why we, work extensively with yourselves. Because it's about understanding even just when new technology is coming out, how you're going to use it, if it's necessary, what difference it's going to make to you. About life cycles, I mean, you can buy such a varied range of different types of DRAM product, and on one hand, you might have the cheapest product, you might well get, a certain number of years life out of it. But we're working with actually with a French customer at the moment, who are looking at longevity within their products, and they are designing on a 5-year life cycle for their SSD requirements because they know what their data throughput is going to be on that device, and they can plan for that device being in service for 5 years,
mm,
rather than just choosing the entry level device and then realizing 2 years down the road that you're going to have to replace it again. So I think it's about making, those choices up front. Obviously, we've already talked about manufacturers are making those technology developments. We're seeing power supplies developing with the 80 plus ratings, we're getting more efficient. We're seeing the architectures and the chip manufacturers obviously designing with more efficiency in mind. And the hope would be obviously that as manufacturing becomes more globally located as opposed to quite specifically in certain countries, hopefully carbon offset of not shipping product all over the world to, different countries will improve as well.
yeah,
So I think there's lots of things that need to work together, and this is not a quick fix. It's one of those things that everybody just needs to have in your mind, because at the end of the day, the regulation is only going to get harder, not harder to meet, but everyone's aware of where we are with
yeah.
this, and we all need to make that commitment to sort of move in the right direction.
Yeah, it's like you said, regulation aside, it's a personal choice for business now, and it's one that I think, you know, if you were to look at the sort of 3 reasons as to work with someone, it's always sat much further down below than those top 3 reasons, if you're including price and stuff. But we're now starting to really see it creep into that top 3, 4 sort of criterion to actually working with Sims is, what are your energy efficiency and your sustainability goals and markers, because it's just there. It's at the top it's in the top 5 now. But it's just changed in the last few years, right?
I think it has, yeah, yeah. I think, as you say, it comes back to the personal responsibility. If you want to work for companies perhaps who aren't so keen on it, or maybe that is just that is their business, then that's obviously personal choice too. But
Yeah.
I think, as you say, we can all vote with our feet, can't we?
Yeah, exactly. So I think sort of to round off as we look ahead, what does the next few years look like for G2, especially when it comes to making rack PCs greener? I imagine it's more of what you're doing already, but are there technologies, materials, innovations, or anything that you can think of that are going to make a real difference in the next few years for G2?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's continuing an awful lot of where we've sort of been. Modularity, I think, is definitely the thing that we're focusing on. This is about not trying to create products that have no upgrade or repair path.
Mm,
The right to repair should apply to every business and in their consideration. You should have these options. I suspect, actually repairing components that have failed will come back in. I think actually there is a market there for people to be able to try and repair and get some of these devices actually working again. Unfortunately, the cost has been so cheap over the last few years that, of course, the option has just been, well, why would you spend any money repairing it? Why not replace it? And of
yeah,
course, what we're seeing now with AI, I think, might well force that card the opposite way, and people might start going, do you know what? There's an option here to actually, invest in the repair process, because actually we can, bring things back in line. And then, of course, the lifecycle engineering side of this, which is what we look for, and when we're talking to customers about projects, is how long is this device going to work? Are you actually buying the right hardware for the expectation of how long this machine is going to remain in service? Because if you can make those right decisions now, it saves buying replacement hardware later on, and I think that's probably in part where we are, along with, of course, all the other things around, making sure we recycle, making sure we do the right things for the business, making sure we're using the right components and materials, but everybody can make those choices.
Yeah, and I suppose the modular bit's important, right? Because I imagine that's the beauty of working someone like yourself at G2 is that modular aspects means that it's not a closed off system. You can get in to replace certain things. It's easier for you guys to do than it may be other builders or traditional routes. Just having that modular system where you can replace and repair rather than just do away with it and start together. That's the key bit, right? It's being more modular.
Absolutely, it's about not having a warranty void sticker across the entrance,
Yeah,
across the lid of the machine that stops people, doing. I mean, obviously, we don't encourage people to go poking around with screwdrivers, but on the other hand, you do need to make sure that things are engineered in a way where they can be disassembled, where they can be serviced, and they can be repaired even after the warranty period ends, and even if a customer doesn't come back to us to actually ask the question, we still want to make sure that we actually give those, consider all of that when we're actually designing the systems in the first place. And as I say, it's something that we do actually fairly regularly, is just very simply rebuilding old hardware with, a new processor, a new main board, new graphics cards, whatever it might be. And then where those components aren't used, making sure that if the customer's going to take them back, that they get either resold or reused, so we always test all the parts to make sure what's still serviceable. And if they don't want it, then, we will duly try and find a home for it as well ourselves to make sure that it goes to the right place and not just thrown in the bin.
Great. That's fantastic, Chris. And I really appreciate your perspective on everything. It's, as we discussed, it's challenging times, it's exciting times, but it's clear there's no simple answer, but G2 really are tackling it head on, especially from a sustainability point of view. And we're hoping to continue down that path of being the supplier of choice, especially for the memory storage side of things. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Christmas. Hence,
Thank you,
it's Christmas jumper day here at Sims. So it's really boring. I mean, I need to get some photos. Our CCO Kev came in dressed as a turkey today, so I'm not going to beat that. So, but no, have a brilliant Christmas.
Thank you so much, and
we look forward to 2026 for you.
Perfect. All right. All the best.
Cheers, Chris.